So, what was life like during the Civil War? Most of the fighting will take place in the South because the North is the invading army trying to keep them in the Union. Everybody runs out of everything, and since the South made very little, they're going to suffer the most when they can't get it. Hardtack. That's hard to explain, but that's pretty much what it is. It's like a biscuit made out of wood. Not really, but that's about the texture. Ticks, lice, dysentery, and diarrhea. It's the life. As you can see, if you take a look at the total size, you can see that lightning bolt right before it gets to the 2 million. That means that they made the line shorter. If they actually took it all the way out, it would run off the page quite a ways. So we're looking at total deaths, 3,600,000. We look at the South, from 2 million, we've gone all the way down to a total size of 800,000. Obviously, size of army is a big advantage for the North. New roles for women. For every soldier that died on the battlefield, 2 were dying in the hospital. For the most part, they didn't really understand that whole infectious disease, and there wasn't a lot of sterilization going on. So if we take a look at some of the women, nurses, we have discussed Dorothea Dix before, but here's her criteria. First, you have to be plain looking, which is code for ugly, and be at least 30 years old, because I don't know what they thought was going to happen. Clara Barton founded the Red Cross. Sally Tompkins, she's the southern version of Clara Barton. She's going to set up a hospital, and probably the baddest person involved in the war, Harriet Tubman. Now, I know that says Rose O'Neill Greenwood, but she's a Confederate. Belle Boyd's a Confederate. Let's just get to the important one. That's Harriet Tubman. Not only did she escape herself from slavery, she went back as a conductor on several trips, brought her family back, brought many others back, disrupted supply lines, was a spy, was a nurse. She will be the first woman in American history to lead U.S. military forces into battle, where she will free about 750 slaves. Now, just like any other war, women were not allowed to enlist, but some of them disguised themselves. That was one of the things. We'll get to Gettysburg, and as they went through and they were burying the bodies, they were shocked by how many of them were women when they actually got underneath the uniform. The book will talk about Juanita Valquez. That's her disguised as a man. All right, what do we do with captured and wounded? That's Camp Douglas. That's an American camp. Well, it is American, the northern camp. The Union began using black soldiers. Both sides exchanged soldiers rather than put them in camps, because I need to use some of my soldiers to watch yours. When the Confederates refused to swap black soldiers, and as a matter of fact, they killed them without taking them prisoner, the North said no more. Neither side was ready to handle this. Both sides were bad. Delaware and Elmira prisons in the north, Libby and Andersonville. We're looking at 25% mortality rate. That means 1 in every 4 people die. Poor nutrition, poor hygiene. Andersonville, as you can see, was basically a tent city. They're not getting enough food. Here are a couple of the survivors. Obviously, there literally is nothing but skin and bones. I didn't want to stay on that picture for very long. But as we look at this doctor's kit, it looks like it'd be more useful in an episode of Home Makeover. Body wounds were ignored because basically you're going to die. We'll talk about, if you do any of that research about the mini ball, these are 50 caliber rifles. And if it hits you in the arm, your arm is going with it. You are now armless. These are large weapons. Surgeons could remove a limb in a minute. They usually used ether to sedate the patient, but many times they went without any anesthesia. So here's another doctor's saws and pliers. This is the only video I'm going to include in that because I think it's educational and short.
The turkey buzzards realized that whenever they saw an army, that sooner or later there would be flesh to eat. And as the armies moved along, they often moved along with hundreds of turkey buzzards overhead, just waiting for the battlefield, waiting for the carnage, waiting for the open wounds, peck out their eyes, and eat the innards as they would any other carrion. And almost a horrific scene, but that's what war is. Pretty horrific in times.
Civil War field hospitals are human butcher shops, with arms and legs stacked in piles. Some 40,000 amputations are performed on the Union side alone, only 24,000 of them under anesthesia. Doctors perform dozens of surgeries without ever washing their hands.
It was 7 times safer to fight through the entire Battle of Gettysburg than it was to be sent to an Army hospital. The death rate there was 30 and 40%. Taking the limb off was just one part of it. Now you had the problem of gangrene, suppuration, infection, and the death rates were just staggeringly high.
Outdoors, they didn't know about germs, bacteria, gangrene. That is a serious infection. You can smell it a mile away. Not actually a mile away, but quite a ways. Now we go back, copperheads, deadly venomous snake. These are going to be our Democrats that are running against Lincoln. Yes, Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, but by the time the war's over, so will Jefferson Davis in the South. The Confederate and Union instituted conscription, that's the draft. The South required everybody over 18, but if you owned more than 20 slaves, you didn't have to serve, which really led to some resentment in the Southern Army. Pay for a substitute. So it's usually about $300. I get drafted, I pay you, you go fight for me. Rich man's war and a poor man's fight. That pretty much sums up 99% of the wars in the history of humankind. Anywhere from 20 to 45, black, free, and slave were used as cooks for construction. Eventually, they're going to be allowed in. Bonuses paid for Union soldiers to enlist. Now, there are bonus jumpers who will take their bonus, desert, and go join another unit to get that bonus. Riots broke out, especially in New York City. That's the most famous. They burned an orphanage for black children. You have about 30 to 40% of the Northern Army are foreign born. These people have only been in the country anywhere from 5 to 10 years. There is great resentment against African Americans that they have to risk their lives for African Americans. Now, everybody is racist at this time. It's just, how racist are you? Everybody suffered inflation, 80% by the end of the war. That means, take the price of any item that you can think of, multiply it times 80, and that's what it costs now. The South ran out of men. They ran out of everything except the paper money, but they printed so much of it, it pretty much wasn't worth anything. The blockade pretty much stopped Southern trade with Europe, and that was their primary, almost exclusive source of income. And we are done.